today is a big day for Donald Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. He's set to accept the GOP vice presidential nomination and address the convention. The 39-year-old is relatively unknown to many Americans, so he'll have a chance to introduce himself to a wider audience. Last night, in a show of Republican unity, several of Trump's former rivals celebrated and endorsed him.
For the sake of our nation, we have to go with Donald Trump.
Donald Trump has been demonized. He's been sued. He's been prosecuted, and he nearly lost his life.
For leading us in this fight will be a man who, although wounded and facing danger, he stood up and raised his fist and reminded us that our people and our country are always worth fighting for.
Some prominent Republicans who have been critical of Trump in the past singing his praises last night, including primary challengers Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. Trump's former Republican opponents rallied behind him and urged voters to choose the former president over Joe Biden. The near-total embrace of the MAGA doctrine at this year's convention signals a shifting identity for the Republican Party. And many politicians who once had doubts are now getting on board. For more on this, I'd like to bring in Paul Waldman. He is a columnist for MSNBC, and we've reached him in Washington this morning. Thank you for making the time, first of all. Now, today, J.D. Vance will address the RNC for the first time as Trump's VP. What do we expect to hear from him, and what tone does he have to strike now that he's VP?
Well, I think what we'll hear from him is what we're hearing from just about everybody at the Republican convention, which is this kind of enormously effusive praise of Donald Trump. I mean, after all, he's number 2 on the ticket. His job is to tell people why they should vote for Trump. Not very many people really vote for the vice presidential candidate. If you talk to political scientists, there's been a lot of research on this over the years. Your vice presidential choice almost never helps you in any kind of direct way. It can hurt you a little. The one case where it probably did was Sarah Palin with John McCain in 2008. But most of the time, they're chosen to kind of shore up some internal constituency or something like that the presidential nominee feels that he has a problem with. Vance wasn't really that kind of a pick. He doesn't really represent any particular geographic area that Trump needs, and he kind of reinforces the main point of Trump's candidacy, which is really always about his base. Vance is the most MAGA pick of the ones that Trump was selecting from. He is all on board with election denialism and harsh anti-immigrant policies. And so he really just kind of reinforces that for Trump. And so it's not as though he's going to kind of bring in people who are currently wavering. That's not the reason that he was picked. And so he's really, I think, not going to say all that much about himself, except insofar as his story will be a tale told to reinforce why people should vote for Trump.
Well, since Trump's attempted assassination, we have heard a lot about unity, a lot of talk about that. What is your assessment of picking Vance as a VP? Do you think it projects unity?
Not particularly. And honestly, that was something that Republicans said they wanted for about 10 minutes. And, if you watch the speeches last night, they were all it was a lot of really harsh stuff about how, immigrants are causing a crime wave and America is descending into chaos. None of this is true. In fact, crime is down dramatically over the last year and a half or so. But Republicans are very invested in the story that since Joe Biden has been president, the whole country has become kind of a hellscape of misery and chaos. That's a story they tell over and over again. They usually blame it on immigrants. When they're not blaming it on immigrants, they say it's because of Democratic crime policies. And so, you don't see an effort to reach out to Democrats in that. And so, it's possible that Trump may, as he has said he is going to, give a speech that is more focused on bringing the country together. But if he does, it will be for one night only. I mean, everyone knows who Donald Trump is. He's very much focused on his enemies, on his own perception that he is always being persecuted and being treated unfairly. And that's that's who he is always going to revert to. You know, there are a lot of journalists who have repeatedly over the years said, oh, well, maybe we're going to see a new Trump. If you see a new Trump, it's going to be temporary. He's always going to be the person that he is. And Vance is somebody who is, like him, kind of an attack dog against Democrats and the president's opponents. And so I think that we may hear some talk about bringing the country together. But of course, it's bringing the country together by making their opponents be quiet and everyone supporting them, which is, not too surprising to hear at a political convention.
And Mr. Wadlam, we know that Vice President Kamala Harris called J.D. Vance to congratulate him. Media reports suggest that there might be a debate between the two. What impact will a VP debate have on both campaigns?
Well, if you look back in history, when we've had these, they don't have much of an impact at all. There haven't been any, except for the one that people always point to is in 1988, when Dan Quayle was kind of inexperienced and young, and people may remember he compared himself to John F. Kennedy, and his opponent Lloyd Bentsen said, "I knew Jack Kennedy and you're no Jack Kennedy," and everyone cheered. But in the end, even though that was a moment that people remembered, it didn't change the outcome of the race at all. The Republicans still won that race, and Quayle became vice president. And so this is true of presidential debates a lot of the time, that they get a lot of news and people kind of pick out these decisive moments. But before you know it, the race has settled back down to exactly where it was before and hasn't really changed anyone's minds. Now, the first debate between Biden and Trump this year may be the exception, that Biden performed so terribly that it really might have a lasting effect. But a vice presidential debate, certainly, it'll be an interesting evening. And but if you look at Vance and Harris, they're both intelligent, capable people. I'm sure they'll both do fine. And in the end, it probably won't change the outcome of the race very much.
All right, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Paul Waldman is a columnist for MSNBC.